I feel like since the start of the crisis, we have to begin with a daily, almost update of the case data from our perspective at the Atlanta Regional Commission. This is a tool that we built to process case-related information for the state of Georgia. And so this is on the far right, the MSA totals on a 7-day moving average. And you see Metro Atlanta, we thought our cases were in decline. We definitely understand that we're reopened and the cases have started to uptick dramatically. And I wanted to keep this in to show you what those counties across the state that aren't in a metropolitan statistical area, that their new case rate, and that's the more rural areas of the state, has also gone up dramatically. So that's something I think we all need to be aware of. On the left is the county change, and you can see clearly that for a few weeks in June, Gwinnett County was outpacing Fulton County in new cases, and now Fulton County has surpassed Gwinnett again. So Fulton County right now has the highest 7-day moving average. So I pulled this out for you from the Fulton County Health Department report, just to give you more of a small area understanding of the COVID case rate data for just Fulton County. So you can see, if you look on the far right, the new case rate over the last 14 days, it's still the highest in the city of Atlanta, followed by South Fulton, and then Sandy Springs. And you'll see if you scroll down to the left, not in alphabetical order, but actually ranked on counts, you'll see that obviously Mountain Park isn't really reporting any, but Hateville and Palmetto, our smallest cities in Fulton County, have the lowest total counts. But the rates are really something you need to look at specifically. So there's wide variation in these rates at the city level in Fulton County. So if you don't have access to that report, I think it's a very helpful report that we get almost daily now in our email from Fulton County at the Atlanta Regional Commission. So with the shutdown, this is a slide that I pulled back out of retirement, and retirement in the sense that I used this chart in the Great Recession to explain how serious the Great Recession was. And so this shows you the percent in job losses from peak and how many months it took us to recover from recessions going back to 1948. And obviously the Great Recession was really, really hard on metropolitan Atlanta, and you can see that in the blue line, the 2007 employment recession. But this 2020 COVID recession is without peer in the history of the United States. And so you can see that red line going down. We made some headway. So, the previous 2 months, we've gotten good job change numbers out at the national level. This is obviously national data. So you're seeing us pulling back up from that decline. And I think this is just a great way to explain how serious the situation is for the US. And so April, and we got these numbers in May. When we got the April numbers on May 8th, it was very clear that everything we thought about which sectors were being impacted were really being impacted. So this chart just gives you a comparison of what happened in metropolitan Atlanta compared to the United States in blue. And you can see in some sectors we didn't decline as much, and others, like other services, we declined more than the United States. So if you were to look at something like a diffusion index, which just tells you how broad change occurs, especially during a period where you're experiencing job losses, the diffusion index was very high for the United States, which means obviously you shut everything down, everyone is impacted. And that's unique among these recessions because there was such a broad impact on the overall economy. And so for us, over 5 years of job gains have been wiped out. And so I'm going to spend a few minutes at the end explaining how long it may take us to get those jobs back. So very severe losses in April. And of course, I look up in early June and start reading the economists that I lean on, Mark Zandi at Moody's.com, and the recession's already over.
Hey.
So a very short
No worries.
recession, but very severe. And so the severity we're all thinking about, and so almost weekly now we're looking at unemployment insurance claims. So if you look at what's published by the Georgia Department of Labor, you'll see that we started to decline, but in the previous week we actually saw an uptick in unemployment insurance claims. So this recovery is very weak and tenuous right now, and so these unemployment insurance claims are not a good sign for us, and something we're watching very, very closely. And of course, tomorrow at 8-ish is when they release the new numbers, and I know a lot of us on this call will be looking at those numbers. And to understand who's been losing their job here in Metro Atlanta, I think it's important to look at the differences by race and ethnicity. As with almost all recessions, this recession is hurting people of color the most, and you can see that. So 65% of all Black households, at least one person in that household has lost their job since March 13th, which is really an incredible number. Everyone has been impacted, but as always, the Black population in metropolitan Atlanta is being disproportionately hurt by this recession. It's something we have to be aware of when we're thinking about relief, especially in low-income sectors where typically people of color work at a greater percentage than white workers. And so if you lost your job, top of mind is always security and food and housing. And so this is a new data set the Census Bureau has been doing nationally to try to survey people to understand how likely it is that they're going to be able to make next month's rent. So this was 2 weeks ago. And so what this really shows you is that percent housing insecurity. 25% of the people surveyed in metropolitan Atlanta either miss last month's rent or don't think they can make next month's rent. And so the current published report, we've inched up in that percentage ranking, which is not a good thing. And now it's almost 1 in 3 households don't think they can make next month's rent. So again, housing security is going to follow job loss. Putting a moratorium on processing evictions has had an impact, and you've seen the eviction rate actually fall as they're not being processed. But again, they're still taking those eviction notices. So this is going to be a challenge in the next few months, because we know, especially in low-income households, and definitely in the renter market, you spend a lot of your income on rent, and you have very little savings to buffer these economic crises. And this one in particular is without precedent. So a huge part of this, and I think we recognize this at the ARC, is how people are moving and whether they're choosing to move or not at all. And so we've been getting almost real-time mobility data over the past 3 months, and we built some really great dashboards to process this information. I'm going to show you some stuff for North Fulton in a few seconds that I think you'll find very interesting. Now, the first report that we're doing every Friday is really this basic COVID update report. And this is something that I wanted to do to bring a lot of different data together. So if you go to the 33 North website, you should sign up to receive this email. And what it'll show you is metro and county level detail on not just case data, but also those unemployment insurance claims and mobility data, how much time you spend out and how much you're literally driving. So this report in particular is designed in 5 minutes to allow you to really consume where we were compared to the previous week. And this is the last report that we did Friday, almost a week, little less than a week. So you can see, because we used the preliminary data from the state, and that's a key thing to understand, the state updates their daily case data as they receive more data especially from private sector companies, about who was tested on that particular date. So this idea of new cases that are preliminary is very critical. So we try to compare preliminary over preliminary. You can see in that previous week, we actually had case rate declines in most of our counties, and you can see that in greens. And then if you look at the unemployment insurance claims, obviously they were going up in the previous week. And of course, the overall time spent out, there was declines in that. So people are moving less, and that moving less information is critical as we start to get into business activity. Are people going to restaurants? Are they going to get their hair cut is something we're focused on. So this is one of the dashboards we built on our Neighborhood Nexus website. I updated it for you this morning. So this is the mean travel distance from a really high-end website of modern GIS and AI tools to process big data. And so you can see how Fulton County compares to the state, DeKalb, and Gwinnett, and Cobb. And so Fulton's in purple. And actually on July 14th, the mean travel distance was higher than it was before the outbreak. And you can see that trough back in April and how much more people are actually traveling in Fulton County, right? But there's some contrary data to this, and I'll walk you through it here in a few slides. So, you know, the previous slide, we talked about people actually traveling by distance. And so this data is from the Opportunity Insights website, and they publish commercial data with frequency that I never thought would be possible. It used to take us years to get consumer spending data, right? There was such a lag in that data, and now we get to look at it almost in real time. So this is state level data and the amount of small businesses that are open by these dates. So you can see the big decline as small businesses shut down for the shelter in place orders. And that Georgia is generally more open. Our small businesses are more open as of July 11th than New York or Texas. So they're opening, and we had a big strong turn coming out of April, but now it's kind of leveled out, and some weeks it's declined. We don't try to get, with this data set, too focused on an individual week, but you can see generally we're not out of the woods yet. It's bouncing around a little bit. And then if you go down to the metro level, you can see Atlanta compared to New York City. If you look at the United States as a whole, right, in consumer spending, our consumer spending is still almost twice as low as the United States is as of July 7th, but a little bit higher than New York City and just behind Dallas in consumer spending. So people move, they spend dollars, and you can see we're trying to recover. We're bouncing around again a little bit in the last 3 weeks, but New York is on this steady uptick, right? So this data is critical with you really pairing it with the case data. You got to look at all of it to see really what's happening, how strong this recovery is likely to be. Because as the case data goes up, I think we all generally understand people are going to be more reluctant to go out and do these external activities that really drive the core part of this data. So again, small business revenue as a result, this is just small businesses for Metro Atlanta as of May 26th, and so that's relatively old data. It was down 37%. And so updating this, we've recovered some more to 29% as of July 4th on small business revenue. So again, some recovery, but not the recovery, you know, I think we'd all want. And again, a little bit up, a little bit down in the previous few weeks. And then I wanted to put this small business recovery data up against other places. So Dallas small business revenue is only down 10% as of July 11th, comparing that to Metro Atlanta is down 27%. So there's a lot of nuance here in this data when you're looking at metropolitan areas. And then drilling down into the counties. So Clayton County, relative to other counties in metropolitan Atlanta, household income is low. And so that means discretionary income, disposable income is correspondingly low as well. So if you look at July 8th, Clayton County, all consumer spending is actually above pre-COVID levels. But Fulton County is still down 11%. DeKalb County is still down 9%. So again, just like the metro areas, there's some pretty big variations at the county level here in Metro Atlanta in spending. And so small business revenue, put this together for you as business leaders this morning. Cobb County small business revenue is only down 4.9%. DeKalb, it's down 16%. In Fulton County, it's still down 27%. And if you think about the nature of the Fulton County economy, especially the core, and especially in the city of Atlanta, you know, a lot of small businesses aren't getting the typical activity that they're used to, especially the convention business and all the entertainment business that just isn't there. And it's, you know, dramatically stronger historical employment numbers in those areas than a Cobb or a DeKalb. And I think that's part of the reason why there's such a huge difference in the small business revenue data. Again, that we've got data as of July 13th is just unbelievable to me as a data geek. So in a way, I'm excited about it, but it's very hard to present this information given that we're still struggling. And so again, for you guys this morning, I wanted you to see at the zip code level net revenue changes by small business areas. So there's some nuance here. And so generally in higher income areas, the net revenue for small business, those reds are bad, is severe. So you can see that. And you can see in the core of the city of Atlanta, really those deep reds as well. But outside around Stone Mountain, small business revenue is done okay. So getting below that county level, you can see not as much decline in, say, an area like the city of South Fulton as there has been in Sandy Springs. And just to make that map bigger for you, so you can see that really for almost the whole state. And then a little bit of nuance here. This takes and looks at low-income worker employment by low-income zip codes and high-income zip codes. So the top chart is the place is a low-income place, and in the bottom one, it's a high-income place. So this is something that I've been looking at because of what the economist who built this reports out, that in high-income areas, generally people aren't spending like they used to, and that has a real impact on low-income workers. So that's absolutely true in DeKalb County, right? So the decline in low-income employment in low-income areas of DeKalb is 27%, but in high-income areas, it's 44%. But in Fulton, actually, it's not the reverse in scale, but the trend is the other way. So slightly less employment decline in high-income zip codes in Fulton, which is contrary to what that economist in particular had been reporting, and I thought you guys would be interested in. So digging into this down to the zip code level now, back to mobility for just a minute. This is basically person trips to these different types of industries. So I selected restaurants, and this is a tool we built that's on our Neighborhood Nexus website. I put the link on here. You can click on this link, hit that drop down, and pick your own zip codes to look at this change. And it's as of July 15th. So 30009, I think everybody on this call should know that zip code pretty well. 30030 is Decatur, where I am right now. And 30303 is actually downtown Atlanta. And so what this shows you is the nature of that downtown economy is such that with office workers and all the conventioneers and conferences not going to downtown. Restaurant trips to restaurants in that zip code are still down almost 80%. In 3009, it's less than 20% compared to peak. So that's a huge difference in the relative activity at the zip code level. So this is a final slide before I get into some forecasts and wrap this up. And this is one of the slides that my compadre, Mike Carnathan, put together using the Census Household Pulse Survey. So this is metropolitan Atlanta. And what I want to make sure we all understand is, out of necessity, there's going to be a lot of virtual learning that happens in the United States. Obviously, for health reasons that, you know, we want to make sure everyone is protected and safe. But if you look at internet available in Black households, it's only 69%. Because I'm obviously very worried about making sure we have good resources for children in this environment to make sure they can still learn. It's my understanding in Fulton County that almost 20% of the students never logged in when we shut down. And so that's a huge loss for them. It's a huge loss for us. It's a huge loss for the Atlanta economy. And so making sure that we're thinking about these resources is absolutely critical for all of us. So looking forward, we all want the V-shaped recovery. And you saw that on my recession slide, but we think it's probably going to be more like a swoosh. We built this scenario with our own REMI forecasting econometric model back in April. We might have overshot it a little bit, and we're thankful that we had those 2 early months of recovery when we started to open back up. Businesses started rehiring. But on the left, if you look at Moody's, and we think Moody's is pretty reasonable, they're forecasting it'll take us, truthfully, if you look at those employment numbers, a while to get back to pre-recession peak. So, you know, we knew these job losses were going to come, and we're going to be obviously updating our forecast tools in the next few months, given that we want to wait and see how we do, especially in June and July on the employment numbers. So our Atlanta Federal Reserve put this tool together. Again, I put the link in here. You can click on this tool and explore it. But coming out of the Great Recession, we averaged 7,000 new jobs per month over 9 years, year over year in Georgia. So to get back from where we are right now to a 5% unemployment rate, we need to add about 8,000 jobs a month. And if we added those 8,000 jobs, it would take us 60 months to get back to pre-recession employment levels. So that's a very, very bitter pill to acknowledge, but you know, we have to be realistic about what we're looking at. And so before we did the webinar that Mike Carnathan and I did yesterday, I pulled this data together doing the research that we do at the ARC about sector level impacts. And of course, this recession has been critical on small businesses. And I thought this was interesting. I hope you look at it in more detail, because it shows you the share of GDP that is generated by small businesses. So arts and entertainment, the majority of the GDP is created by these small businesses. And so if you look at a virus contained scenario or a slow recovery, a muted recovery scenario, that difference in that gray bar is how long it'll take for that sector to recover. So there's some nuance here. Obviously, the healthcare sector, most healthcare facilities have turned back on elective surgeries, and we all know they were hurting financially. And it was a decision that financially I think was critical for them to make. So relatively speaking, their recovery period is very short. But again, a manufacturing in a muted recovery, it'll be out till 2025 before manufacturing gets back to normal. So this has to be in the back of our mind as we're thinking about everything that's going on. So we know, and I hope you take some time to look at this, food insecurity is going to be a challenge for our children. Childcare was challenging before this crisis, and now we know, and you probably have your own personal stories, and we're listening to our staff at the ARC, trying to figure out childcare, especially in a virtual environment, is critical, because a lot of parents are going to be teachers this fall across the United States. And so there's a consequence to that. It's not that I would say to anyone that we need to have all of our schools open. That's not our job at the ARC, but there's economic modeling that's been done really over 10 years ago to understand the impacts of not being in school. And when you look at that data and that McKinsey report that I was using yesterday, you can see there's going to be economic consequences for these kids in a virtual environment, because it's not quite the same as being in class. So those are critical things I want to focus on. And so I won't go through these, but I hope you read them in more detail. I did put the link in here as well, because I do want to protect as much time as possible for any questions you might have. And again, the PowerPoint is already in the chat. And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. And I will definitely send out the presentation via email as well. To start us off, I have a question from someone. In your opinion, how is the U.S. going to be affected if there is a restriction on international imports?
Restriction on international imports? It would definitely depend on the imports, but that's a huge question, almost out of my capacity to respond thoughtfully. And as I get older and lose the few hairs I have left on my head, I've gained just enough wisdom to know when I don't know when I'm talking smartly about something. But you know, the thing that I think we need to remember is we still export a lot of goods as well. And I think if we read the news, I'm always very interested in what happens when other countries retaliate. And we have become very dependent on goods from other countries. I think we all know this. And so it's a challenging environment. Again, you know, there's been a lot of stuff that I've tried to read about what it's meant in this crisis to get PPP gear in particular, and how hard that's been. That's something I think we all need to take a hard look at. You know, what production needs to be back in the United States to make sure that really our resilience levels are higher than they were, and we're not so dependent on other countries is critical. At the same time, one of the things I've talked a lot about over the past couple of years is the impact of, truthfully, fracking on our energy resources, because we learned a new technology and it really increased our energy supplies in a way that made America, again, almost consistently a net exporter of energy. And I know that's down in the weeds, but the economic history of the United States, I mean, it was a good thing for the United States to be exporting that. It brought a lot of income back in. So you know, I'm not answering the question very well, and I apologize for that on a Zoom call, but you know, you can tell it's piqued my interest that is an issue. But clearly, resources we need in a crisis, we need to be able to have production capacity in the United States. That I would say for sure. All right, what else?
Can you provide some perspectives on the causes regarding the racial disparities on slide 11?
Yeah, so, and maybe I'll send the other deck as well. I can send that, Stacy, the one we did yesterday, because right, there's more of those slides. The shortest answer is, and I did say this in the presentation, sectors like food and accommodation have historically in the United States always had a higher share of people of color working in them. And so for a while in the United States, when you looked at unemployment at the start of this crisis, when the hotels shut down, actually the highest unemployment rate was the Hispanic unemployment rate at the national level. And that's mostly because of the shutdown in accommodation, right? All those hotels sent everybody working, especially people cleaning rooms, home. So because of those sectors being, dominated in the core work by people of color, when they shut down, and you can see actually in this chart, that they have been hurt the most, and hurt the most in the sense that even in a virus contained scenario, it's going to take them the longest to recover, right? And that's critical for us to understand. So if you listen to like a Raj Chetty, the economist up in Harvard, he'd say like, any future stimulus ought to be directed to help people that are most in need. And that's why these types of charts are so critical, because they're going to have the hardest time getting back into the workforce. And so we need to think the most about being sophisticated in the way we apply stimulus to help the people that are the least likely to get back to normal.
Okay. Are there any provisions in place for those who will be facing eviction in the coming months?
So on that, I think, you might want to spend some time Googling state of eviction moratoriums. For a while, we had a spreadsheet that someone had put together of what each state was doing, and it varies dramatically from state to state. And so in the other slide deck, we included some information about commercial mortgages. And it sounds like I'm not answering the question, but again, our economy really is an ecosystem. So it's not just stopping evictions, right? Because you've got landlords that have mortgages as well. So the only thing I'd say is we tried to provide some information. We had more time to say it's not as simple as trying to fix it at that moment in time, but rather that you've got to think about the whole system of housing provision, because just stopping evictions doesn't help those landlords when they're trying to make their basic mortgages as well. But again, having financial support for that is handled at the state level. And I think Georgia really isn't where some other states are in thinking about that. But I think it is a looming crisis. And it was a crisis before during the Great Recession. This is going to be a little bit different. We're not seeing big housing price declines this time. In fact, housing prices in most areas are up. Different conversation too. A lot of you know a lot about that on this call, I'm sure. So again, I think we're just in the beginning. I know some local governments are trying to do some support. The city of Atlanta obviously is wanting to do, and will have funds to try to support people staying in their homes. But the scale of that funding at the city of Atlanta scale isn't going to touch the need. There's just no economic way a city like the city of Atlanta has the resources to really do that at scale. It's almost we have to acknowledge it's a national issue, like unemployment insurance, right?
Regarding testing, oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying these are tough,
oh.
great questions. You guys, well, I'll be glad. I'm gonna have to go have a beer after this one.
Yeah, I'm just a question moderator. I'm just don't shoot the messenger here. Regarding testing, how are the positive testing categorized between symptomatic, contagious, and asymptomatic? How does this difference impact a positive testing accountability?
Who asked that question?
A super special friend.
Oh my God. Wow, that's another question that even I don't think I've seen a good breakdown of data. Anything that hits my radar that really gets at that. I feel like I know Frida's on this call and she works for the hospitals. I got a feeling. So yeah, that's again a great question, but we are really looking at this data as just test positive for most of the reporting we've been doing. And I haven't seen much on that. And again, I try to acknowledge when I don't know something. There's got to be somebody on this call that could pipe in if they're asking questions like that with some more thoughtful responses, because this virus is complicated. The reality is, here in Decatur where I live, there are 10 CDC staff members within 100 yards of our house. I get blasted by people that know a lot about viruses, and usually I'm just swimming listening to them talk about it. But what they consistently say is, you know, we just don't know that much about this virus. Even now, they're saying, you know, it's hard to know, especially this asymptomatic thing. I think has been for them intellectually, and these are PhD biochemists, the whole kit and caboodle, how challenging it is to understand this virus.
In light of the bad news regarding the spike of Georgia cases, is there any good news in the relatively decline in deaths? You know, the lag of the cases for the deaths. Is there any, what's kind of the news for that?
Well, all right, so if you break down those Fulton County reports, what you're going to see, and it's reported well in the national news, is 20 to 29-year-olds are the bulk of the new test positives in Fulton County. And I think it's generally accepted the consequences of testing positive in that age group are dramatically different from our older citizens who contract the virus. And so that's a huge difference. My friends that work at the hospitals have consistently said they have gotten a lot better at treating it. I know we're all reading about this. I am scrambling to read everything I can about the vaccine work that's been done. I think we're all going to be unbelievably happy with how they progressed on the vaccines. If you haven't read about the Oxford vaccine, I think you should. I think it's an amazing story. As someone who would highly recommend reading The Great Influenza, the book by John Barry, which really opened my mind up to why a virus as a thing on this planet is maybe our greatest enemy. It's a wonderful book. And the story of the Oxford vaccine, it follows a similar trajectory in storytelling, that they learned a lot about modern vaccines when they tried to figure out what to do about the Ebola virus. And that, I hope you go read about it, because what they learned trying to build a vaccine for Ebola is paying off big dividends right now in how they're developing these modern vaccines. And I think hopefully by early next year, which would be record setting for vaccines, they're going to have something that I think is pretty workable. It's not ideal for me, especially when I'm about to eat, to hear them talking about growing kidney cells in bats to create enough base mixture to add these proteins to. But that's what's happening. And I think that if there's one positive for me, even though it doesn't feel real right now, it's that they are making headway like they never have in human history on a potential vaccine. So I don't want to oversell that, but I feel like it'll be months down the road, and hopefully you'll let me off the hook. But I am quietly very, very optimistic about what that can mean for us. And long term, because this is going to happen again, right? I mean, human history is about viruses and us battling them. So if we can get better at developing these vaccines, that'll be good for all of us. So that's my biggest positive. Yesterday, baseball's back. And I'd like to say Atlanta United won, but that did not happen. Atlanta United has gone very Atlanta of the last 3 matches they played in. So
we have one more question, and I'd like to see if Brian Noyes with the Fulton County Schools, if maybe you might be able to better address this question. There's a disparity on the internet service to households in light of digital learning for the school year. And I wanted to see if maybe you could speak to that digital divide amongst the students.
Yeah, thank you, Stacy, and Michael, thank you. Great information. I've been watching and listening to every slide. I really appreciate it. We are seeing and have been dealing with, a forced interaction across the entire district in the spring of every student trying to learn virtually, and that did, and not just our district, it did in every district, exposed where there were some weaknesses. Fortunately, the school board, and if there are any school board members on, I would love for them to also to chime in, because I've only been here about a year or so, but they have for years been making investments in the devices for our students. And fortunately, prior to all this happening, they had already invested so that 6th grade through 12th grade already had a device per student, so 1-to-1 ratio. When COVID hit, we took an immediate step, Dr. Looney did, in adding more devices. And this Thursday, I think they're going to consider even taking further steps, trying to reach from 3rd grade all the way up through. And some of that is the education academians say that, you know, the K through 2 is tougher to reach through the virtual platforms, but when you start getting into 3rd grade, they can learn themselves and read, and so it's a better platform. But it did expose, and a previous conference, Stacy and Callie were very gracious, because Dr. Looney did ask for support in this. And many of your members did reach out to us. Fortunately, we were able to take care of the device gap that we have, or what we thought was a need, through 2 very large grants from T-Mobile and Sprint. And so we currently have about 7,500 hotspots that were provided to us. And we've started working through the summer with summer school students and trying to find out what our distribution model would be, how we identify and set up the criteria for families that are in need. So prior to last Thursday, we were looking at you know, a smaller universe, but now we're to the full virtual option in schools. We do think that the 7,500 should address a large amount of that, but we won't know until we do school level reviews of where those needs are and meeting those criteria. So I think the first month is going to be a pretty good gauge of how much this 7,500 device will cover as far as what our families were able to identify at the school level, and then find out how much greater than that it is. And just another point that Michael made in his presentation was the number of students who logged in. He's exactly right. That's very similar to the numbers that we had. We gauged it in large part by the number of kids that, because if you remember, we didn't change grades from anybody that had been gone to virtual as of March 12th when we went. So your grade could increase, or if you didn't engage, we gave kids an incomplete. So we found that different schools and different grade levels had different interaction, but the data point that Michael gave is somewhere around 20% probably didn't engage. Some of it was internet connectivity. Some of it was just disengagement, social emotional concerns that we have and will continue to have, and trying to find ways. And some of it was seniors that just kind of said, I'm done, you know, and moved on. So that 20% doesn't represent universally the internet connectivity issue. But I hope that answers the questions.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate that. And as the mom of an 11th grader, I can appreciate what you're saying about checking out.
Well, can I just make one more quick since I got the floor?
Yeah, I know we also have Frida Hardage on the call as well, and I wanted to see if maybe you wanted to give a MARTA transportation kind of touch point update.
Where'd she go?
Frida. Oh, it looks like she's connecting in. Let's see. Okay, we'll give her just a second to connect back.
No, if I could say one thing,
yeah.
that response is exactly why we try to make these slides. I really try hard to think about the guy Robert Putnam, who wrote Bowling Alone. He had a new book called Our Kids, and I really want us to be as leaders in that mindset. You know, that the school system is doing the best they can, but making sure that every child has Wi-Fi access isn't something that they're normally built to do. And that's why we try to get on these calls and have those kind of moments to say they might need additional resources to figure this out in this new environment. And we're kind of all in it together to help them figure it out, you know, and that's the critical point. So this has been a beautiful meeting from my perspective, if nothing else, to hear that update from the Fulton County Schools.
Great. Frida, do you want to give us a few words? Oh, wait, you're on mute. You're still on mute. Let's see if I can unmute you. Nope.
Yeah, Frida's on her cell phone, so that may
Yeah, I
be what's.
don't, yeah, and I can't unmute her from here.
Stacy, just real quick, Brian, I know I think had a follow-up comment that he was trying to make.
Thanks, Callie. And I just wanted to, Michael, I appreciate your comments. We are in a challenging time, and the schools are doing a lot of studies on epidemiology that are not part of normally running a school.
Right.
Internet connectivity outside of the schools is not something we normally do. The chart that he showed from the Fulton County Board of Public Health is one that we follow. It's not daily, but it's pretty regular, about every other day. And the community spread has really spiked since the end of June. And Dr. Looney had multiple times expressed concern that if the community spread did not go down, we would have to consider a change to our platform. We had planned for the choice. We had planned for an option where it was face-to-face and students would have an option to go individual remote. And at the time of him making the announcement last Thursday, that confirmed community spread had spiked considerably, and that we were going to go to a virtual option. We already had over 10, 12,000 families that were had requested the virtual option. And so we hadn't even gotten to the deadline. So the numbers were, well over 10, almost 15%, pushing towards 20 of our population already taking that option. And they were given a commitment to a full semester. So we saw Cobb and Gwinnett go full virtual, and it's a concern. So we know that everybody's concerned. Childcare, how people are going to work this out is a huge concern for us too. Our employees have to address that, and we're working on that as well. Our desire is to go face-to-face. We know it's the model that works, that we know it's the best for social emotional supports. So we're not looking to go to a virtual other than being forced into it because of the numbers and the increase. So there will be more details on some of the plans discussed at our board meeting tomorrow. But I just wanted to express to everybody that we appreciate the community support, the businesses. We understand the dynamic of us working together, not just for the future, workforce that we've been talking with Callie and Stacy about for a while, but also the day-to-day of your kids and taking care of them. And we hate it. We want them in classrooms, but right now, it's just not where we are.
Thank you, Brian. It looks like Frida didn't have a good connection. Yeah.
She texted me and said she is so sorry with herself and she wasn't able to unmute. So
Right. Alan, you want to wrap us up?
Sure. Thank you, Stacy. And Mike, thank you for an informative presentation of some really timely data. We appreciate you being with us today. And if there's a benefit of not having lunch today, you've got the rest of the afternoon to digest data instead of digest lunch. So a lot of great information. And as Mike said, that information is available and you'll get it from Stacy. We're a really blessed and healthy community from a financial standpoint, and if you look at our community too, we probably got two of the best healthcare organizations anywhere in the country, certainly in Atlanta. So with Wellstar and Northside here, two of our board members, Frida, a past board chair and a significant executive at Northside, and Lindsay Petrini, who will be our board chair next year at Wellstar. Those folks went on to peak alert 5 months ago and then never got off of that. So remember to thank them and their staff when you get a chance to see them. We're a healthy community for a lot of reasons, but a lot of it is because of the excellent healthcare that we have right here in our midst. I appreciate everybody joining us today. The Greater North Fulton Chairman Circle is a very influential part of our chamber, and we value your partnership. We look forward to many more events with you, virtual or otherwise, and hopefully we're not too far away from having one in person. So thank you for your attendance, and we are adjourned until the next time.
Thanks, everyone.
thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
You appreciate it.